Hello again, everybody. It's Mr. Mitchell again, and today we're going to be looking at classifying triangles. As you can see on the screen, these are the types of triangles that most likely you guys have all been exposed to through elementary school and the things that your teachers taught you there. So we're just going to go over this really briefly. First off, we have a right triangle, and a right triangle is any triangle that has a 90-degree angle in it, like the one that we have here. Anything that has a right angle in it that is three-sided is considered a right triangle. Next, we have an acute triangle. An acute triangle is a triangle that has three angles, and all three angles have to be less than 90 degrees. So as long as you have a triangle where all three of the angles inside are less than 90 degrees, then it is an acute triangle. Our last triangle is an obtuse triangle, and as you can see, the biggest difference here is that it has one angle that is more than 90 degrees. So if you have a triangle that has an angle more than 90 degrees, it is called an obtuse triangle. And this is one of the ways that we can classify triangles, is by the types of angles that they have on the inside. The other way that we can classify them is by looking at the sides and how the sides relate to each other. So if we look at our first triangle on the left over here, at our equilateral triangle, what we're talking about here is each of the sides of the triangle is the same length. And these little tick marks here, these little lines that go through the sides, when you see those, that's just an indication to you that when you're looking at this triangle, that any side that has that tick mark is the same length as the other sides. So once again, equilateral triangle, all three sides of the triangle are the same length. Our next triangle is the isosceles triangle. And as you can see, an isosceles triangle is different from an equilateral triangle because it has only two sides that are the same length. And once again, you can see the little tick marks here that represent those two sides having the same length. The third side does not have the same length. Lastly, we have our scalene triangle. And a scalene triangle, as you can see, has no sides that are the same length. They are all different lengths, and that is what classifies a scalene triangle. So when we talk about naming different triangles or classifying triangles, what we need to understand is that we can't just call it an isosceles triangle because that only talks about the lengths of the sides. We could not also call it just a scalene triangle because there are different types of scalene triangles. So we need to be able to classify triangles by naming them with two different aspects. We name them with regards to their angles and also to their sides. So here's what I mean by that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the three different descriptions that we have here on our screen, and we're going to go through and we're going to figure out how do we name or describe this triangle so that people can see it quickly and understand what it looks like. So if we look at the first one, it says it's a triangle with two congruent sides and one obtuse angle. And the problem that we have is we can't say just that it's an isosceles triangle, which means that it has two congruent sides, and we can't also just say it's an obtuse triangle. So what we have to do is we have to combine those two things. So as we look at this, we're going to say that this is an obtuse isosceles triangle. So we can go ahead and put that down. Obtuse isosceles triangle. So what we're going to do now is, as you guys finish this question, I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to name the two triangles that come afterward. So you name them by the type of angle and then by their sides. So go ahead and pause the video and do that now. And hopefully you guys have done what you needed to do. So let's go ahead and look at these other two and see what we call these. So the next one says it's a triangle with no equal sides and no obtuse angles. So if we try to name this, first off, it's no obtuse angles, which means all the angles have to be acute. So the first part of our name is it's an acute triangle. But we need to know what type of acute triangle. So next we see that it says it has no equal sides. So if we look back in our video, we'll see that no equal sides means that it's also scalene. So it's an acute scalene triangle. Okay? And finally, we have a triangle with no equal sides, and hopefully you remember again that that means it's a scalene triangle, and it has one 90-degree angle. So since we name it by angle first, we would say that this is a right scalene triangle. And there we have it. This is how we can name a triangle based off of the type of angles that it has and also what the sides look like in comparison to one another. So our next test is we need to be able to draw each of these types of triangles. So once again, I'll help you with the first one. We'll go through it quickly and you can finish up with the rest of it on your own. So we see that it says it's an acute isosceles triangle. So remember, acute means all the angles are less than 90 degrees, and isosceles means that two of the sides have to be the same length. Now, since we're sketching, I'm not expecting it to be perfect, but I do want it to at least look right. So if we're looking for an acute isosceles triangle, then we're going to have a triangle that looks something like this. And we can put little tick marks on there to represent the two sides that are equal. So we have our isosceles triangle with the little tick marks, and it's acute because all the angles are less than 90 degrees. So pause the video and finish up with the rest of these. Do a quick sketch for each one. And I hope you guys were able to finish that in time. And here we go. Let's go through the rest of these. This next one says it's an obtuse scalene triangle. So I'm going to start by drawing an obtuse angle. And then I'm just going to make sure that all of my lines are different lengths. And if you're not quite sure if you did a drawing that's very good as far as that's concerned, you can just do this. If you put a different number of tick marks on each side, then that represents that all three sides are different lengths. So by doing that, I can say all three sides are different, which makes it scalene, and it's obtuse because I have one angle that's more than 90 degrees. Our next one is a right isosceles triangle. So I'm going to start by drawing the right angle, and then I'm going to make these two sides be the same length with a right angle. And there we have the right isosceles triangle. Our next one is a right scalene triangle. And again, I'm going to start with the angle. And this time, I'm going to make one of my sides of my triangle be longer than the other, which will make this side also a different length. So I have three different lengths for sides, and I have one right angle, which makes it a right scalene triangle. So my last drawing here is going to be an obtuse isosceles triangle. So again, I'm going to start by making an obtuse angle. And this time, I'm going to say that these two need to be the same length, and they're pretty close. And I'm going to connect those 2 points, and this length here will be different than the other two. And as we can see right here, we have an obtuse angle. So this is how we can draw each of the different types of angles based strictly on the 3-word description of what that triangle is. So hopefully that made sense to you, and if not, you can rewind it and try it again. And for that matter, you can just make up your own types of triangles. Just put an angle first, put what types of sides it has, and then see if you can sketch that triangle. And the last thing we're going to do today is you guys are going to take these pictures and you are going to write the description that matches each of these triangles. So, as always, I'll help you out with the first one, and then from there you'll take on the rest on your own. So I'm going to start actually not with the one on the far left, but this time I'm going to start with the one on the far right. So as we can see, the first thing I notice is that I have 3 different lengths on this triangle, which means that this is a scalene triangle. So I'm just going to write that down just so I don't forget it. It's a scalene triangle. And then as I look at all my angles, it looks very close right here on this one side. This angle right here looks very close to a 90-degree angle. But if I look at it really carefully, and if you guys want to, you can take your paper and put it up there on that corner and see if the corner of your paper matches that triangle. I'm fairly certain that it does not, and in fact I'm pretty sure that it's actually an obtuse angle. Now if I'm wrong about that, you guys can tell me in class, and I will definitely apologize for my ridiculous eyesight. But as far as I can tell, that's an obtuse angle. It's a scalene triangle because all three sides are different lengths. So it's an obtuse scalene triangle. So why don't you guys pause the video and go ahead and see if you can figure out the rest on your own. And now let's go through and let's finish naming the rest of these. So our first one on the left here, we have two sides that are the same, which makes it an isosceles triangle. And we can also see that all of the angles here are less than 90 degrees. Therefore, this would be an acute isosceles triangle. Okay, so we have acute isosceles triangle. Now this last one is a little bit tricky, and I did this on purpose just to see if you guys can figure it out on your own. But we notice that all three sides are the same length, and we also notice that all three angles are the same. Now the proper way that we would name this would be an acute equilateral triangle. Okay? So an acute equilateral triangle. However, one of the rules of triangles is if all three sides are the same, then all three angles are also the same. So when we name this, we don't call it that. We just call it an equilateral triangle. So that's all we really had to write for this one, is we just have to put in that this is an equilateral triangle. So if you did the other, that's fine. But in the future, we just call it an equilateral triangle. And that's it. So I will see you guys in class tomorrow, and we can make sure that we all understand all the different types of triangles that we're going to be dealing with for the rest of this year. See you guys tomorrow.